everyone. Thanks for joining us on this great day in Florida, right? There's no snow, there's no rain, it's all good. I'm going to pull up my screen to share. It's hard getting all these screens working in concert. And you should be seeing my
Yes, we can.
strategic. Can you see my slideshow?
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay, good. So we're going to talk about our online strategic planning tool today. And we have sort of lots of details to go through. I need to make sure hey, Drew, I just printed these out. Can you grab them out of the printer?
Sure.
Or Claudia?
Yes, I can. I've got them.
Awesome. So we're going to go kind of fly through a number of things. So we want to make sure, as all of you who are already trying to use our system, those who have never heard of it and are interested in using the system, kind of understand what the features are. And the key is we want people to sort of take away with understanding how you can use this. It's a really powerful system if you use it and use it to the fullest extent. And we're still actually building features into the system, but we want you to understand how it provides you content that's embedded in the system. So the content focuses on evidence-based and promising practices. It's got some features in here that you can use as you engage your team, so that you're really learning about these programs and how you go about structuring them, the questions that you as an entity who wants to establish such a program, kind of discussions that you have. So the system is really sort of built to provide those kinds of things for you. So we're going to go through these topics today as best we can, and then hopefully have time for questions and answers. So our focus is right here. It's on something we call the Transition Program Tool. And it now has, this is an online strategic planning system, and it now has two major components to it. So some of you, many of you have used our K-12 education component before. So that's right now, I think we have at least 40 plus states that actually have a site within that system. And then over 1,000 school districts from states, from within states across the country that actually do planning here. So this piece of the system focuses on really K-12, transition program, college and career readiness for students with disabilities. And so what we've done is we've learned really since that system's been online since 2012, and we've used this planning process beginning back in 1996. So we've built on what we've learned about that to structure our post-secondary education component. And that's where we're going to focus today, since it's new and people are just starting to use that. So, so really the planning process sort of lives in this transitionprogramtool.org. And what it does is it takes the available information that we have about evidence-based and promising practices and puts it into a step-by-step planning process. So you learn what the content is through this process as you work through step-by-step, saying, how are we doing this? How is it working for us? How well are we doing it? And where do we need to improve or change what we're doing? And it really is a system that's designed for teams. We've had people go in one by one and try to add all this information for their site. And they learn that, well, I don't know the answer to that question, or I don't know what we're doing in that area, or gee, I wish I had some better ideas about how we might do this. All of those issues sort of disappear when you do this with a team. So bringing in all that input from multiple folks, and then the strategy and idea generation that that your team members have. So we continue to put out there that this really is a team process. Now, all the IHE teams, that have been working with us or have been planning Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Programs already have a site in this system. And several of you I know that are on today, St. Pete, and other programs that are already existing in Florida have a site in the system and have been at least gone in and started using the site. So we're excited about that, but just want everybody to know that as you plan with our center to develop a Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program, we will build you a site in that system. This planning process regarding post-secondary education programs involves really, or focuses on 4 domains, areas that we call domains. And that's the student domain. What do we do with students? What do we expect to happen with students? What do we expect of students who come into these inclusive post-secondary programs? And then we focus also on faculty and staff. So what is it that faculty need to learn? What faculty need to do? What's the perspective that faculty need to have as they work with students with intellectual disabilities that they're not necessarily used to working with? So we focus on really how do we build capacity in staff. So the focus there is really on capacity. And then we look at the program itself and the institution. So we think about what are the program components? What does the program offer? How does the program operate? How is the program that serves students with intellectual disabilities integrated, connecting with the broader institution? So whether it's a tech college, a state college, or a university, this program becomes part of that institution, not out in a portable outside of the institution. So part of this section focuses on how do we make sure that happens? What's the curriculum? How is the curriculum delivered? Those sorts of things. And then we would go to sort of a broader concept system piece. And that's really thinking, how are we connected with a broader community? What's our mission? How are we connected with employers? How are we gathering information about employer needs? So thinking about outside when we bring students in, so we might be talking about partnerships here, as students come into the program, as we recruit students, as we work with the K-12 system to improve preparation of students to go to post-secondary education. Those are the kinds of things that we think about in the concept and system domain. And it's a real important piece of this. If you can think about, this is what we call an ecological approach. So you're sort of starting with the student. What's the student? What are we doing with the student? What is the student doing? We move out to the sort of next layer, which are faculty and staff who engage with the student. And then we have the broader program and institutional context that provides the space for that. And then we move more broadly into the community as we're thinking about this program, this institution within that context. And again, what's that interchange, and how do we build those relationships? So that's the areas, or those are the areas that we focus on when we're thinking about higher education and post-secondary education programs for students with intellectual disabilities. So again, this whole process, as you think about it, guides you through these very specific topics that are organized in these domains. And it might be thinking about, how are you going to fund this program? What are the services your program's going to offer? Who are you collaborating with? How do we broaden those collaborations? And then what's the institutional commitment to this program? And these elements are really fundamental, not only to starting your program, but to sustaining your program. So all of that more or less comes together in this system, in the strategic planning system, and in the process that we use. As we move into thinking about accessing the system, then again, I want you all to keep in mind sort of a number of things. So like I said, the system is not for individuals. The system is for states, it's for districts who use our K-12 college and career readiness component of it. And then as we move into planning post-secondary education, it's for IHEs, institutions of higher education. Now, you're going to find yourself within a state. So right now, all the IHEs that we're working with through our center are under the state of Florida. So we have a hierarchical structure to the system. And as we add systems or IHEs that are not in Florida, then they'll be also located within within a state context. So right now, every IHE that we worked with has a site, and as we plan, we have more and more programs developing across the state. As people start doing this and contact us, then one of the first things we do is we set up a site for that IHE. What do we need to do that? We need the name and email address for the team leader. So this is the primary contact person for that IHE regarding their inclusive post-secondary education program, or specifically the Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program. So that's going to be the person with the sort of benefits, the permissions that go along with the role of a team leader. So we need that information, and we always need to make sure that information is updated and accurate. We'll get messages from people, I can't log into the system. Well, they've used a different email than what was set up in the system. So there's some really technological or techie kind of things that we have to pay attention to as we help people establish their sites and use their sites, so everything works well. Remember, in the background, it's ones and zeros. And if there's a one where there should be a zero or vice versa, it's not going to work. So once the site is established, then the team leader can log in and add team members. And we're going to sort of demonstrate that in just a minute. But the hierarchy or the process of doing this is our center establishes the site. And to establish the site, we need the team leader and the team leader's email. So we are the only ones that can do that. But once we've done that for you, then the team leader can log in and add members to your team. And ultimately, these members are assigned specific roles. And each of these roles includes permissions. So for example, the team leader can log in, can see all the history of a site, all the various plans that this team has done. We have teams, for example, in Rhode Island that go back to 2000 or 2012. So they can go back and view everything that they've done, which really gives them power about what we've done and what we've accomplished and what issues remain that we need to tackle. But the team leader can do that, and then of course I have members and assign roles to those various members. So each year you will get a site that relates to that planning year. If a team leader changes, please notify us ASAP so that we can assign that role to another member, because it's the team leader, remember, that has that sort of power to go in and change team members and their roles and things like that. There's a note taker role as well, who can actually work with the team members and things like that. But for right now, we're really saying keep us informed about that team leader. At some point during the year, we'll turn off the planning function. And so as you start planning for, say, we've been planning now for 18-19, we're implementing, we hope, 2019, and then we're going to come together and think about 19-20. So before this institute, we're going to turn off the 19 planning, and then you'll start planning in your 2020 site. Now, information will move or can move from one site to the next, or 1 year to the next. So don't fear on losing anything. But and we'll talk a little bit more about how we think about closing out the site and preparing for the next big planning event or planning institute, so that you do stay on top of what we planned this year, what we did this year, and what we accomplished this year. So that moves that information into your next year's planning. So I want to reassure everybody that we have significant security measures in place that protect all the information in the system. So we've got several layers of security. This improved significantly when we moved our site from Cornell to UCF. So we're really sort of proud of that. Secondly, to remember is that we don't report individual information from this system. So when we do our annual report about our work to the state, we compile information. So we might compile information across all the needs assessment or all the strengths, and we'll say, here are the strengths of what's happening in the state. Here are the needs that we've compiled from those doing planning with us, so that we can inform the legislature and other leaders about what the needs are to support these programs. So, so again, we don't report individual IHE information gathered in this system, but we do compile it and aggregate it, and we do report that information. Okay, so we're going to jump right into the tool now, and I'm going to make sure I can bring this baby up. And but it's going to make me probably sign in again, which is fine. So here we go. Now I gotta move my share. I'm gonna share to, well, there we go. Can you see it? No, I had to go back and share some more. Where are you? Okay, can you see this?
Yes.
Fantastic. So this is where you land when you click on Transition Program Tool. And when you land here, what we're going to focus on is post-secondary education. So if you already have a sign-in for Intact, then you're going to be able to choose either one of these with your login. However, whether you have to be on a site, assigned to a site, or assign roles as an administrator to be able to open up things within this new section, if that's not your area of focus. So just keep that in mind. So we're going to choose Post-Secondary Education Institute, and you're going to come up and need to enter your email. And then I already have a password, obviously. So I'm going to enter that and sign in. If you've not been in, if you're getting into the system for the first time, then you're going to use your email address for the password. And this is kind of spread out in the slides. I'm not going to go through the slides because I want to demonstrate this live, but the slides that were put in the chat box, it just kind of sort of lists some of these features that I'm talking about, so you take those with you and understand. So I can open up again, all the post-secondary assessments. So what's going to come up is you're going to have a whole list of post-secondary assessments that you have access to. So if you're Broward College, you might have Broward College from 2018, 2019, 2020. Same thing with all of these. So you'll be able to check on which year you want. And when we get our samples set up, then you're also going to be able to go in and log into the samples. So those will show up on your dashboard. So the very first place that we land is on the dashboard. So I'm going to actually go down here and choose this particular one. So you'll select which one you want to use. And then the next thing you know, you're going to come up and you'll have your status, who's logged in, what state I'm in, what is my sample, and then we've got counties and IHEs and branch institutions and those sorts of things. So let me just tell you a little bit how that's organized. So if you're tech college, then your umbrella is the school district. So might be Broward County Public Schools, it might be Miami-Dade County, it might be Lee County. So we're going to have that listed here for you. And I think if I pulled up the post-secondary assessments, I don't know if I should spend any time doing this, but you're going to, let's see if we can find, Union State College, McFadden, Orange, Pasco, Robert Moore. I was looking for one from, here we go, Cape Coral Tech. So I'm gonna select that. So you'll see they're in Lee County, they're in under Lee County Public Schools, and then this is the institution, Cape Coral Technical College. So those of you with technical colleges, this is how you'll be set up, or this is how you are set up. So Orange Tech, you'll find yourself under Orange County Public Schools, and that just kind of tells us that's where your contracts flow, for example, and that's where your umbrella is, but we will be working directly with the tech colleges specifically. So with Lee County, we've got actually 2, Cape Coral Tech and Fort Myers Tech, and then in Broward, we're going to soon have Sheraton Tech as well as McFadden Tech. So you all will live under Broward County, but you'll be working in a plan specifically for your institution. Now, that may be the same, or it may look the same, that so Cape Coral may look just like Lee, or just like Fort Myers, or Sheridan and McFadden. But what's happening, I know, is that in Lee, some of the programs that are available for students at Fort Myers are not available for students at Cape Coral, and vice versa. So you're really going to start looking at what you're doing within the institution. And of course, your team leader or your team people are still going to be those people from the district that have helped you set this up. But we just want you to understand how that system looks, or how that structure fits. Okay, so I'm going to go back to so you can always go back to your list. You can spend a lot of time looking at your old plans, which aren't any on here yet. And I'm going to go back to this sample. So when you land on your dashboard after you've signed in, most of you, as you're starting a new assessment, are going to have a button here that says Start Assessment. So there are 2 fundamental, or I guess I should say 3 fundamental components of this whole system, whether you're working in K-12 or whether you're working in post-secondary. And that is, you're going to be involved in assessment, a self-assessment, you're going to be developing a plan, and then you're going to be reporting. And the overview section basically is just going to give you information about this system, what's in the dashboard, what's in the overview, what are you going to do in assessment and planning, and what are you going to do in reporting. And so it's really just a little primer or primer on what's in this tool. And then when you get to the assessment and planning piece, which this is empty, so I'm gonna actually go back to Broward counties or Broward College, because they look like they did pretty good stuff. So, but when you get on your dashboard, it's going to tell you that based on that assessment that you chose, it's going to give you the title, it's going to give you the state, it's going to give you all that information, and this is an active assessment. So you would start an assessment. I think that's what the one just showed for sample. And then or continue assessment, or you can show the history of what you've done, which is pretty cool as people want to go back, or new members come on your team to get that information. And this gives you basically the steps within this assessment and planning process. So first thing you're going to do is you're going to get your team information in there. Then you're going to assess your status on the extent to which you're implementing the evidence-based and promising practices. And then you're going to make a plan, and then you're going to report progress, and then do an end-of-the-year report. So these are basically the steps that we go through in assessment and planning and reporting, so that it's a full cycle. But those are the main components of the system. You all don't have this thing called tools. Eventually, you will have something called tools because we want you to be able to generate additional reports, and so that you can use your data. The whole thing that we're kind of interested in making sure happens is that you use your data. So as you're working in this system, you're gathering and inputting information about yourself. What are we doing? What do we need to do? What have we done? How well have we done it? Those kinds of things year after year and during the year. And then you can generate reports that you can share with your team, you can share with your school district, your board of trustees, whatever the case may be. And you can also download all the data that you're putting into the system. So if there's a way that you want to analyze your information, then you can clearly do that. And I'll tell you, as we work with this in our national center, we go in and we analyze all the strengths of what's happening at the local districts and at the state level around the country, because that tells us who can we call on as resources. And that's the kind of information that we'll gather from your plans, is who's doing well, who has a credential that's resulting in students getting employed, who has really good family engagement going on, where's all the students making SAP, completing their coursework on time, and graduating on time. So we can show you that. And then we also do that with the needs information. And the reason we do it with needs is that helps us design then either professional development events, identify webinar topics, or things that we need to include in our institutes, and products that we need to develop. So by using this and really doing a good job with what you're putting in there, then that gives you better information to pull out. And that information is specifically for your use. So here on the, so here's our main functions. And then here's our areas, and here's our domains that we talked about: student focus, family, program and institution, concept and systems development. And so we're going to always be working in these domains. And the first thing we're going to do is assess status, and we're going to make a plan subsequently when we identify what our needs are. So in this case, a couple of things to keep in mind that I want to point out. Well, let me go over now to Broward. I don't know. Is Craig on here? I don't know if he is, but I hope he doesn't mind me using
I don't think he is, Paula.
his plan. Okay. So I've got Broward's colleges pulled up now. And so you can see that they've gone in, they've got their team information done, their date. They've actually looked at self-assessment in these various areas. And then they've actually worked on a plan to focus on this third domain. So these buttons are going to tell you what your status is in that. So in this case, you've got a gray, which means you haven't started it. You might have a yellow or a gold button here that says you haven't finished it. And then you'll have a green that tells you that you have finished it. So, so they've done, looks like they've done their assessment, they've done planning in this particular area. But we've also done something for them, is we've gone in and we've updated or uploaded a document into their system. I'm going to show you something else. So now it's way over to the left and I don't want it there, so I'm going to move it to the middle. So all I got to do is hit these buttons to move this around on the screen. Now, there might be times that I would want to move it to the left or to the right, and I'll show you that. But anyway, so one of the important things people do is they add links. So you might add a link to your student accessibility services. You might add a link to your registrar's office. You might add a link to the student handbook. You might add links here to information or to vocational rehab or to whomever that your team can use when you're doing planning. So we didn't add any links here, but we certainly could add the link to our homepage. I might have Claudia go and do that for everybody. But then you've got that resource with you when you're as you're doing the meeting with your team. And that's the idea, is that we've embedded information in here so that you don't have to bring a lot of stuff with you. So just like I did, you can pull up the information from this agenda or whatever document, and maybe it's your evaluations from when you did faculty development, or maybe it's your student reports on SAP, or your curriculum document. So what the curriculum sequence that you've planned out. All kinds of things can you can upload there, and it's really easy. You just push the button, browse for your file, and then upload it. And we have a state, we work with Rhode Island. They have a state plan that they use for their state capacity building. And then we have, I don't know, 35 or 40 districts in the state. Believe it or not, they have that many districts, you know, a teeny little state. And they have sites for all their locals, and they do, they've already done their 2019 Institute back in the spring. But so they upload, there must be 10 or 15 documents up there in there that the state uploads for their locals to use. So when they bring them together for planning, they've got their school performance reports, or whatever the case may be, then sample documents that the teams can use for their planning. So that's a really important feature that that we want you to be aware of. And as you plan to come and work in November, or work before then with your team, then again, use those sorts of things. The other thing that you'll be able to do is you can download your assessment data. I'm not going to go into that because I don't have that much time, but this takes all the information that you've input into this system right here. It's not pretty. Well, I can show you the file if I can get back here later. Oh, maybe I can. Oh, there it is. Okay. So this comes in an Excel file. And so basically you're going to have how much you implemented, what your extent implemented, your evidence rating for those various ones, whether or not it's a priority. You can see this one thing that they did planning around as a priority. They're going to make a plan on it. All of the information that you wrote would be there, or that you entered in here. So that's the student focused planning. Then you'll get to faculty and staff. So it's for all the domains, it's for all the benchmarks in the domains, et cetera, et cetera. So here's where they wrote what they were doing. Here's where they identified what their strengths and what their limits are, et cetera, et cetera. So what's nice about that is what we found is the states that we've been working with over the years is that they also, that's a good way for them to compile their strengths and their needs. And what they find over the years is that their needs have now turned into strengths. So they've got new needs that come about, but that they've addressed those needs in the past and they've become strengths. So that's a real good piece to do that. And then the plan data, it's the same thing. It's exactly, okay, so I'm not able to get into this one this time. So your plan data will be there as well. And then there are the PDF files. So you'll be able to just download a plan of your plan itself. So you've got your team information. You've got the domain was program and institution focus. So here's their goal. Here's what they're working on, their strategy, and then here's what their tasks and all are. So this is something that you can download and print and take back as you add other members to your team, or as you report back to the upper echelon about what's happening and why it's important for you to continue coming to the Institute. Okay, so let's explore the next thing. So I just wanted to make sure you understand what's in the dashboard and able to use that information to your advantage. So again, as you think about going to step 2, well, I guess we can go to step 1. So step 1 has all the people that were with Craig, and it has the team leader, the team member, and then a facilitator. And so you can, once it's in here, you can edit them, or you can remove the team member. And so Craig's the one that can do that. And then most of them will have a note taker as well. So if I was to add a new member here, I need their first name, their last, their email, organization, and the role. And the role is real important. So it's a team leader, a member, a note taker, or a facilitator. And so these roles have different functions. And there's just one note taker, and there's one team leader. And so you kind of have to figure out who that is. Okay, so this is where we really get to the nitty gritty of this stuff. So here is this, steps 1 through 3 that we call, or that we have under assessment and planning. So it's get your team member, name what this plan is. Then you're going to assess your status in each of these in each of these areas. Now again, as I'll remind you as we're finishing up today, don't try to tackle all of these at the same sitting because they're comprehensive. But here you can see in the student focused domain, there are within that 8 different benchmarks. So these constructs within this domain represent the evidence-based and promising practices that we identified around these programs. So again, I think you'd heard me talk about, we've pulled together sort of a group of experts in this area, or people with significant expertise in this area, I should say, in the summer of 2017. And we looked through that work that we described under overview. Sorry about that. And compile it into this framework, this evidence-based and promising practices framework. So that's what the constructs in here represent. So in this case, it's students you use person-centered planning and assessments to really help identify what your student's program is going to be. So if you're at Orange Tech, are they going to be in the carpenter program? They can be in electrical. If they're at Miami, Dade County, Robert Morgan, are they going to go in culinary, or are they going in digital design? Or when they get to SEU, what's their area of concentration is going to be? When they're at UCF, what is that area of concentration going to be? Are they going in hospitality? So thinking about a person-centered planning process. And then how you're going to build self-determination skills. That is a predictor of post-school success. So we've integrated information in here about that we know of predictors that predict success for students with disabilities. They're engaged in paid work experiences. They know how to request and use accommodations so that they're fully engaged in their program and at the institution. They use technology for their academic, employment, social, personal environments, or within those environments. They understand their rights and responsibilities. We've had some students that have had some issues that were not in line with the code of conduct. So how do you deal with that? So thinking about as you're developing your program or improving your program, how do we make sure that students understand what their rights are, but also what their responsibilities are? They use financial aid as needed to support their enrollment. We were on the phone today with a program person who talked about some of the student needs regarding financial aid, as well as understanding these sort of rights that they had within the institution and the responsibilities that go along with those rights. And then a big issue for folks, as we addressed in our mid-year institute, was how families are engaged, how family members are engaged with the student, again, considering FERPA and those other issues that the IHEs deal with regarding parents, student information, and that kind of stuff. So anyway, that's just an example of the content that lives in here. And then for each of these things, there are reflective questions. So this will just sort of guide you in terms of thinking. You do not have to go through, you would be overwhelmed if you went through and answered each one of these questions, because we've had people try and do that. And at some point they just go, oh my God, I just can't do this. It's so much information. But this gets you thinking. This will stimulate your thinking. So as we're thinking about student skills, how are they building those skills? What kind of service learning are we providing students through which they can learn to build those skills? How are they engaged in social activities? What kind of support? I know FAU provides tutors, or not tutors, but mentors that work with their students regarding social activities. And their mentors are really focused on that social engagement on the campus. So anyway, these all have pop-ups here. So as you're thinking about what have we implemented, here are the reflective questions that are aligned with that particular benchmark within this domain. And it's the same thing. How do we know we're doing this? So I think a lot of people, as they start out, you're going to say, we do not have any data regarding this practice. So all you have to do is hover over, not occurring. It's not yet occurring, we're planning it. It's sort of happening with some students, but it's not consistent, or this is fully and widely and consistently implemented. Then you get the same, here's your scale for your evidence of your quality of evidence or your findings, and then here's your priorities. So there are a lot of things within here that are embedded, sort of features as well as embedded content. So those are the kind of things that we want you to learn to use. So if you don't understand what priority, just hover over them and that'll give you the information. And then you have to click develop a plan. So when you go through this, now we're in Broward's plan, so they didn't identify anything there, but they did do program focused. So, so as they get to program focused, then there are things like, what are the policies and procedures that support students' enrollment and completion of their program? What campus services support the student? We had a conversation about a student today that needed to use the early or exceptional conditions withdrawal. I think it's something like that, because they had some real issues going on. They need to go to the university and get that withdrawal approved. So, what are those services that are supporting students in doing that, and how are they connected to our program, really? Credential is a big thing. You got to provide a credential. Work experiences are a huge predictor of post-school success. Again, something that they expected to happen through your program. And then sufficient material, etc. Resources support the program. As we talked with this program person earlier today, it's clear that they can spend a lot of time when you have a lot of students just managing issues that arise. So it's not just, it's coordinating getting their scholarships, it's coordinating implementing your grant, it's coordinating getting students enrolled, it's coordinating making sure that you're keeping up with students during the semester to make sure they are on track to make SAP, so that if not, you can intervene. Understanding if student programs need to be changed. Again, what's your FERPA aligned family outreach plan, these kinds of, and are you collecting your evaluation data? You'll always hear me talk about that. But anyway, so in this case, Broward went in and they've talked about what they're doing with campus services. And here's another piece that you can do with this section is you can just pop it out. So as you're working with your team, then you're able to write in this broader space. Scroll down through it. Now, so again, there's a scroll over so you can see what the directions are. One of the keys that I could show you if I was in one of the K-12 plans is, have you done anything in this area last year? Right here would be a statement that says view 2018 assessment. And you would click on that and it would bring up everything that you did in this section for 2018, if you did anything. You could do the same thing here. So wherever you had input information last year, you'll be able to pull it up this year. So as we set up the 2020 sites for all of you, then you'll be able to pull up the 2019 sites. And you can edit that, copy it, paste it in here, edit it, hopefully your description is you're going to add some things, you're going to add things to it, your strengths, what those are, and then your needs may change. So all of that is going to be copy, paste, edit. So if you want to make it easier for you. Okay, so here, this goes through and you will choose which of these do we want to work with. Do we want to pick one in and faculty focused? Do we want to pick one in program focused? Do we want to pick one in concept or one in student? So as you're starting out, again, you're not going to do all benchmarks in all domains because you will be overwhelmed. But again, for every single one of these, you've got reflective questions and you've got indicators, and then you've got your scroll over so that you can have your scales there. So we're going to go to make a plan because they identified that they wanted to make a plan in this particular domain. Okay, so what happens when you make a plan is all the information that you input into the system is going to move forward into planning. So the student-focused domain, they were working in this area, so they identified an extent, which was nothing. They identified they weren't doing this yet, but they identified it as a priority, and they clicked make a plan. So it's going to roll over here to the planning section. Now, like in this domain 3, where they actually did the description, the strengths, and the needs, then all that information now is carried forward, and it's all carried forward from wherever they have that information. Now, one thing to think about, it lists here your benchmark numbers. So they went through all the way through 4 benchmarks within this program planning, and what they did for each of those is listed here. What you would do if you were just now starting in the system, you would have a start plan. But since they have already started, it's going to show start goals, I guess. So again, here's all the instructions. So we talk about strategies. So what are your goals? How should you write goals? We've done research using those hundreds of state and local plans that we have in our K-12 component to look at the relationship between having a good plan, having a technically sound plan, and then achieving your goals. So the better plan that you write, the more likely you are to achieve your goals. So, and we presented on that a couple of times, 2, 3, 4 times. So keep that in mind. And so that what we provide here are goals. Think about your goals. You want to write them in this way. Here are the program development strategies. You're going to choose sort of which one of these. We're going to think about data. We're going to think about capacity building. We're going to think about resource mapping and development or partnership development. Those kinds of strategies are relevant across all those domains. And what we've done here is we've identified sort of the key characteristics to database decision making. And they're really, you can turn these into tasks if you want to, but the key characteristics of data might be, again, you're going to yield information that's valid and reliable. Why bother if it's not? You use to identify where you're successful, and you use to identify where you need to make improvements. You gather that information from a number of sources so that you have a comprehensive picture. You might be getting information from rehab. How many of your students that rehab is working with have been placed? You might be looking at Career Tech Ed. Again, there are data that CTE reports every year to their accrediting body about enrollment, concentration, completion, and placement. So those data will be available for the students in your comprehensive transition program. So use that information to develop strategic plans, identify what the professional development needs are, allocate resources, determine what technical assistant needs are, etc. And a real important one that we think is worth looking at is the labor market projection data. So as you figure out what are the strengths of your institution when it comes to providing credentials for your students, then what are the data that can tell us where jobs are available in these various areas, and what employers are saying they need in ways of employees. So think about that as an important piece. We talk about capacity building. It's, again, building capacity of your faculty and your staff and your stakeholders to contribute and serve. And a lot of that will be you're providing professional development and technical assistance to build capacity within those groups. Resource mapping is figuring out what the heck is out there. So what resources do we have available to us? How are we already working with K-12 to recruit students into our program? How are we accessing other VR? Well, we were working with a program yesterday that's starting their program application and their grant development. They have a really significant partnership with their Center for Independent Living in their area. And so in that case, when they started looking at resource mapping, that center is a VR vendor, and they're all set up to do mentoring services, job placement services, etc. So when you start looking out within the institution and then beyond the institution, it kind of tell you where we can pull from things. So they don't need to allocate funding in their grant or in their program development for that service, because they're already partnering with this group, and that group is bringing in resources from other sources that will serve those students. So that's why resource mapping, when you think about your program development, you're going to look at what's out there, what you can tap into. And then in terms of partnership development, this would be a great example of a partnership that to work with their CIL to provide those services to their students. So that just lays out sort of what the key components are of those various strategies. So here they haven't started anything in there, so they would go to start goals, but we're going to jump over here to where they have established their goals. Well, I don't know, maybe we should go here first. So the first thing you're going to do is you can pull up example goals. So here is domain 1. Here are example goals for domain 1. So this is just a suggested list of the kinds of things that you would accomplish, but I want you to notice how we write them. So we write them as they're focused on students. So students are enrolled, students demonstrate skills, demonstrate career-related skills that they've earned through their work experiences. They use accommodations. They use technology. They understand their rights and responsibilities. So these are aligned with the benchmarks. You can see that, but they're examples of what goals might be in that area. And then it's the same thing for strategies. So here are those 4 strategies that we just went through. We talked about database decision-making, capacity building, resource mapping and development, and partnership development. So these are examples of strategies in this area, student-focused planning or student-focused, for each of these strategy categories. And again, it's a resource there. Now, when you get down to view example goals here, then those are going to be focused on certainly this domain, and they're going to align somewhat with the various benchmarks that are in there. So, they're using program evaluation to improve the program and services. There's policies support students, et cetera, et cetera. And then the strategies are the same thing. So here are database decision-making strategies, capacity building, resource mapping, et cetera. So identify technology resources on campus and determine any accessibility issues, collaborate to resolve them. So that's, again, where is the lab? Where do people get screen readers? Where do people get in large screens, large text? Where do students get Braille if they need it? Where do they get those resources? So what's available to your students? Where can students go get writing help, etc.? So these, again, when you think about the program, then those are the goals that you're going to, examples you're going to get here, and the strategies you're going to get here. So, so basically they went in and they have started their plan. Here's this area. Here's their goal. They right now have 2 goals in there. And they've just identified that they're going to use database decision making, and they're going to do resource mapping. And you can add other development strategies to address this benchmark, or you can just have one for one. And then if you want to add a new goal, you just add the new goal. Why doesn't that work? There you go. And so you write it in and choose what strategy you want. But if you want to get rid of the whole thing, you just go over there and take it out. And you can do the same thing here. You can change your strategies and your plan, or you can get rid of the whole thing. So those are, again, some of the functions, the ways that you navigate here. So we're going to go look at their plan in this area. I think this is the one they have. So what you'll see again is that all the information is going to move forward. So when your planning date, the domain you're working in, the goal that you're working on, and the strategy that you've chosen. And then you identify a list of strategies. And again, you can scroll through this, and we're not going to go through their content. I wouldn't want to do that. But it's going to tell you what goal related tasks are. And we don't have samples in here because when you go to the examples for the strategies, for those 4 strategies, they are pretty much laid out as tasks. So you can refer to those as you're writing or developing your task. So another thing you can do is, let's go back. So I'm going to save these. You're always going to go back and save. Here's the plan. I want to go to step 1 of the plan. There we go. So I might come over here and do the strategies, and I'm going to take that and I'm going to move it over here, and I'm going to take this and I'm going to move it over there. So now you can, well, I better do it the other way because I can't see it because y'all are there. But you can resize this thing, you can move it around so that it's there. And so when I come in here to edit the plan, that's supposed to be there, Claudia, so we need to make sure that stays up there. So the idea is that you have that there so that you can access it as you're working on your plan. Okay, and then you're always going to keep saving, and then you're going to come down and you're going to say, okay, this is our goal. We've talked about goals, and these are the things that we're going to do to accomplish those goals that we've set out. And well, those are the strategies, and here's exactly what's going to be entailed in that. And then you're going to think about, okay, what are we going to produce? So this is all lined up like a logic model, because we use logic model in most of what we do. And when you go to write another grant, if you already have one, or you're going to write a new grant, we're going to give you an example of a logic model to use. And your logic model can come right out of this plan. So when you're thinking about going through this plan, and this is going to be much more detailed, but your logic model can help align what you're doing with your grant with what you're doing and thinking about in your planning process. So that's why you see, again, goals, inputs, outputs. Outputs are your activities and your products. Then we're going to give you examples. So what they've done is they've said, okay, well, we're going to produce a recognized credential for this program. That's one thing we have to have in order to actually set up a new program. But you can go in here and you can look at, again, those examples that we've come up with. These are the products, recruitment materials. What are our internship and employment list? Resource summaries, the scholarships awards, so documents regarding scholarships, estimating staff needs, employment projections. All of those are things that you will produce as you're doing your work in your program. And then you'll come down and thinking again about evaluation, you're going to think about, okay, what are we expect to happen? So those are expected outcomes. What indicators will tell us what happened? What indicators, what data can we collect? What evidence can we collect that will show that we've achieved or not achieved what we've set out to do? And then where are we going to get those data from? So you'd be looking at your data sources. So so here they've looked at their examples and they said, well, I think we're going to do 3.3. So this is number of students who earn their target, who complete their program of study or earn their target. But again, this is a whole list of indicators that you could use within this area that they're planning, in which they're planning. And again, these are expected outcomes, and so those indicators are aligned with these expected outcomes. So you meet your recruitment goals, you meet your completion goals and your enrollment goals, your students make SAP, they earn their targeted credential, they complete these work experiences. So you have data that will show you that these things happened. And then figuring out where you get those data, is the other piece. So some of this is already going to be there. Student transcripts is going to be there. You're going to have industry certification records. You're going to have projection reports. You're going to have exit reports that show you what students are doing. You're going to develop potentially surveys for your students and families or focus groups to gather their input about that. So all this stuff, the content is embedded in this system. And again, you can X that out and start over again, or you can add a new outcome. So in this case, they've been focused specifically on enrollment in the credentials, which would be a short-term outcome. Then we have intermediate and long-term outcomes. And then the rest of this is just really, as you come together meeting, do you need others to be engaged with your team so that you can actually implement and do the work that you've identified to do? Do you need additional resources? It might be funding, it might be technical assistance from us. You can identify that. So these are just questions, again, to help you. They've identified they don't need any additional resources, but I think in their tasks, they did identify a number of additional stakeholders like VR and whatnot that they needed to involved with what they're doing. So, that is their plan for this particular domain and this particular goal. And then when you go to the next goal, then you're going to see tasks associated with that, outputs associated with that, outcomes, examples, etc. So, so you do, for each of your goals, you have a plan. Okay, so then the sort of final component, okay, I think I wanted to make sure I got through all of this content that's embedded there. Yeah, so again, when you think about your planning, you've got your example goals, strategies, outputs, all the things that we just went through. And again, you will have, if you've done this before, you will have information here, a button here that says, move forward last year's plan. So it's going to move it forward, and you can go in and edit that to become your new, to work on or to add to your new program, to your new plan. And there's some techie sort of things that need to happen with that, but you'll see when I could go to one of our local districts or one of our states that have been working on this, and you'll see a button that you can use last year's goals and plans and just edit those. So again, that's why we want to make sure that if you use it, you'll have access to it. And the better you use it, the better information and access you'll have. Okay, so we talked about uploading links, uploading documents, downloading PDF files, downloading Excel data. Okay, so then the last thing is reporting. And this is where everything is going to flow forward. So this is a progress report. So for those of you who met in January and developed this plan, we had you sort of go in here and look at this in June. So you'd want to go back and say, okay, how are we doing? Are we doing what we said we're doing? Do we have any slippages, etc.? All of that can be part of your formative evaluation in your grant proposal. So as you're thinking about the connecting of all of these things, the content that you're looking at in here clearly will feed into what your program looks like and how it operates. And then your other information in here for reporting, formative and summative evaluation information can also be embedded or planned for in this system. So we want to make sure everybody sees the connections across these things. It's not just, oh my God, we have to get online and do a plan. It's how you use that system to really connect across the various things you'll do with these programs. So it's going to forward your goals. It's going to ask you, here's your strategies that you were going to use, and then you can go in and report. So here was your planning date. Here's all the information that's carried forward. It's going to ask you if the goal was achieved or not achieved. Did you drop it? Do you need to keep working on it? And then here's all your tasks. You're going to go through that and see, is it done? Is it not done? What do we want to do with it? What are our next steps? Same thing with your outputs and your products. And then same thing with your outcomes. And then your outcomes, you're going to look at what have we done? Are we collecting it? Is it underway? Is it completed? Or we haven't started it yet? That's going to be real important information because, again, your institutional accreditation people are going to want to know how well your program is working. So by using this system, you'll be able to feed data to them about what's happening with your students, as well as the annual reports that you do for us. Whether or not you got the additional resources that you need for the technical assistance that you need, and whether or not you've had any barriers. Because we want to know what your barriers are. So if we review your information, we want to know what those were. And then at the end of the year, so this would be in preparation. So as September is coming to a close and you're really thinking about last year and now you're moving into this year, then how can we close out last year? And it'll be very similar to your reporting project. But this is, again, we're going to be thinking about we need to move this goal to next year. You're going to actually now sort of summarize what you did and be able to use that information. Maybe somebody dropped the ball. Maybe that task never got done. And then the same thing with your outputs and your outcomes. So everything that you put in the system is going to continue to flow forward from assessment to planning to reporting, and then from year to year, so that you, again, you have access to this information in a number of ways. So, so that's our main. I'm going to log out now, reduce that, and come back to my slides. So your slides are going to show you all these things that we just talked through, just as sort of as a reminder of what's in there. So the content, the special features, and the strategies. So that's what I want to just mention now. The strategies are, be sure to gather your team, review the domains and benchmarks kind of at the 1,000-foot level so that you can start, select a starting point. So where in here do we want to start? Or where do we want to continue? Where did we leave off the last time? So that we know where we're going. And then again, being sure to pull your data together. Maybe you're uploading documents in here, maybe you're uploading links, but you want to have the information that's relevant to your decision making. And then really have the meaningful discussions about specific benchmarks, because those benchmarks really are embedded in your program application and in your grant proposal, so that as you talk about how we're going to recruit students, how are students going to make SAP, what credential are we going to offer, all that stuff feeds into your application. And then as you're working, we want to always see people leave with one really good sound plan. We want a complete plan. So that here's your assessment, here are our needs, here are our goals regarding this, here are our strategies, our tasks, our outputs, our outcomes, and our data. So that we really do have a plan for moving forward. I know when we get back to campus, it's like, oh my gosh, I don't have time to do that. Too many things going on. Too many things going on with trying to implement the program. So this helps you guide your implementation of that. Collaboration is essential in this because you've got to collaborate within the institution, within your team, within the broader institution, across those components that I laid out, that ecological approach, and then outside your institution clearly.